the world seemed like it was running on an ordinary loop. Emma was walking down the same street for the 100th time, but she had a strange feeling in her gut. A sense of déjà vu lingered in the air, as if she had been here before, many times. The same pedestrian crossed her path, a car honked at the same intersection, and the wind stirred the same loose paper down the sidewalk. Something was wrong, and she couldn't figure out what. The clock on the nearby building ticked away as the world continued without her. She stopped in her tracks, feeling the tug of repetition at the back of her mind. Everything felt too synchronized. Emma glanced at her watch, realizing that the hands hadn't moved in what felt like forever. She had lived this moment already, but she couldn't escape it. Her stomach churned with the weight of a thought. What if she couldn't break free? Emma couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. It was like the world was an actor reading from a script she already knew. Even the conversations she overheard were the same. She heard two strangers, a man and a woman, discussing a broken elevator, talking about how they'd have to take the stairs to the top floor. The words felt too familiar. Had she already heard this exact conversation? She turned, as if to leave, but found herself walking toward the same intersection again. Her steps felt like they were being guided by invisible hands, as if the universe itself were forcing her to relive the same moments. "I'm losing my mind," she muttered, feeling the tight grip of panic around her chest. She stopped in front of the same coffee shop, the same barista greeting her as though it were another ordinary morning. Yet, deep down, Emma knew this wasn't ordinary. Nothing about this was ordinary. As she tried to walk away, her feet carried her back to the same spot. It was as if she had no control over her body. Emma glanced at the barista again, noting how his smile seemed painted on, unnaturally perfect, almost forced. "Good morning, Emma," he said, the words slithering off his tongue like a rehearsed line. It was then that the horrible truth dawned upon her. The entire world around her was playing on repeat. Every face, every voice, every step, an endless cycle. Emma had tried to change her routine, taken different streets, but each time, her feet brought her back to the starting point. No matter how hard she tried to resist, the world always reset itself. She had become a pawn in some cruel cosmic game, and it terrified her. "I need to wake up," she whispered. "I have to escape this." Emma's nerves were frayed as she turned to leave the coffee shop. She had to find a way out. She couldn't keep living like this, trapped in this maddening loop. Her mind raced for an explanation. Any kind of rational explanation that could bring her peace. But nothing made sense. As she walked past the old bookshop, her eyes caught something on the window ledge, a crumpled piece of paper. She grabbed it, her hands trembling. The message was short but chilling. "You are not in control. Break the loop." It felt like someone was reaching out to her, offering a way out, or a warning. Emma's heart pounded. She looked around. Who had left this note? Who had known she would find it? Was this a sign? Or was it just another trick of the mind? "There has to be more to this," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. But as she looked back toward the coffee shop, it felt like the loop had already begun again. Clutching the note, Emma rushed to the local library, hoping to find something, anything that could explain this strange, torturous loop. She pushed open the heavy wooden doors and entered the dimly lit room. Dust motes floated in the air, casting ghostly patterns on the worn wooden floors. The library smelled of old paper and leather-bound books. She walked down the aisles, her footsteps echoing off the walls. Each book she touched seemed to hold an answer, but none gave her the clarity she craved. Hours passed. She could feel herself becoming more and more desperate, the weight of time pressing down on her shoulders. Finally, her eyes landed on a thick yellowed tome, its title, The Timeless Loop, catching her attention. Without thinking, she opened it. The first page revealed a strange, ancient symbol. Could this be the key to breaking the cycle? She could only hope. The strange symbol on the first page of the book haunted Emma's thoughts as she sat down in the library's musty corner. She stared at it for what felt like hours, the lines and curves of the design seeming to pulse in the dim light. It wasn't just a random symbol, it felt important, almost like it was calling to her. She quickly flipped through the rest of the book, each page filled with cryptic writing and images, some of which seemed to shift in the corners of her vision. The deeper she read, the more it became clear. This wasn't just about time loops. It was about controlling them. The book detailed an ancient ritual, a way to harness the power of the loop and manipulate time itself. But the more she read, the more disturbing the text became. The ritual wasn't just about breaking free. It was about controlling time in a way that no one should. Emma felt a deep unease. Could the loop be the result of someone, or something, messing with time? Or was she the one trapped in some twisted experiment? As Emma turned the pages, she noticed one illustration that caught her attention, an image of a large ancient clock with broken gears. A figure stood before it, performing what looked like an intricate ritual. The description was vague, but it spoke of an anchor that could control the flow of time. Emma's eyes widened as she traced the lines of the drawing, a chill running down her spine. The anchor could be a person, an object, or an event, something that held the fabric of time in place. And someone, or something, was using this power. She had to find out who. She felt the weight of the realization settling in. She was no longer just a passive observer in the loop. She was a part of it, and to escape, she would have to find the source. The idea terrified her, but the thought of staying trapped in this endless cycle was far worse. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She quickly left the library, clutching the book under her arm, and stepped out into the street. The world seemed unchanged. People walking, cars honking, the sun still shining in the sky. Yet, as she made her way down the sidewalk, it felt like every person she passed was looking at her, as if they knew she was on the brink of discovering something dangerous. She quickened her pace, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Had someone been following her? Was she simply paranoid, or was something more sinister at play? Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the book had triggered something, a ripple in the loop that was beginning to draw unwanted attention. She had to figure out who was behind this, and why. But every path she took led her back to the same intersection, the same coffee shop, the same street corner. The cycle was tightening around her. Emma's eyes scanned the familiar street, and for the first time she noticed something she had missed before, a small, unmarked building tucked between two towering structures. It was an old, weathered building, with faded red brick and dark windows that seemed to swallow the light. She had never seen it before, and yet it felt like it had always been there. Something about the place sent a shiver up her spine. Without thinking, she crossed the street and approached the building. The door creaked as she pushed it open, the sound echoing in the silent hallway. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the walls were lined with strange symbols and artifacts. At the far end of the room, an ancient clock stood, its hands frozen in place. The same symbol from the book was etched into the clock's face. Emma's heart raced. Could this be the anchor? Could this be the source of the time loop? As Emma stepped further into the room, the heavy door slammed shut behind her, plunging her into complete darkness. Panic surged in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. Her eyes adjusted slowly, and the faintest glimmer of light illuminated the clock at the far end of the room. She could see the same symbols from the book carved into its surface. Slowly she approached the clock, her fingers trembling as she traced the lines. The air seemed to hum with energy, a low, vibrating sound that filled her chest. She placed her hand on the clock's face, and in that instant she felt a rush of time, images flashing before her eyes, memories she didn't recognize, timelines splitting and converging. Then, a voice echoed in the room. "You should not have come here." Emma's heart raced as she spun around, but no one was there. Was it the clock speaking to her? Or was there something more in this dark, ancient space? Emma's fingers hovered above the surface of the clock, the strange energy coursing through her veins. The room was silent, but the hum of the clock grew louder. She could feel something pulling at her, urging her to make contact. Slowly, she placed her palm against the cold surface of the clock face. In an instant, the world shifted. Time seemed to stop as the room blurred around her. Images flooded her mind, memories of places she had never visited, faces she had never seen. For a moment, Emma wasn't sure if she was still in the room, or if she had been transported somewhere else, entirely. She was falling, spiraling through different realities, unable to hold on to anything solid. Then, everything stopped. The room was still. The clock ticked. But now, something was different. Emma could feel it. A shift, a crack in the cycle. The world around her seemed to fall into place as the vibrations of the clock faded. Emma blinked rapidly, trying to orient herself. The room was still the same, but something was different. The air felt charged with energy, as if reality itself had been rewritten. She took a cautious step back and noticed a small door in the corner of the room that hadn't been there before. It was carved with the same symbols she had seen in the book and the clock. Without thinking, she walked toward it, her pulse racing. Each step echoed in the silence, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the room was holding its breath, waiting for her to act. She reached for the door handle, and the moment she touched it, the door creaked open, revealing a long, narrow hallway bathed in a faint, otherworldly glow. The door seemed to beckon her. She had to find out what was on the other side. The moment Emma stepped into the hallway, the air thickened. The floor beneath her feet creaked with each step, and the walls seemed to close in around her. The glow from the clock faded into the distance, leaving only the eerie light ahead. The hallway twisted and turned, becoming increasingly narrow as she moved forward. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of her breath and the distant echoes of her footsteps. Then, the hallway opened into a massive chamber. It was a cavernous room, filled with strange machinery and devices, many of them covered in dust. The walls were lined with shelves filled with odd relics and books. But what caught Emma's attention was the central figure in the room, a tall hooded figure standing before a massive swirling vortex. The figure's hands were raised, as if controlling the very fabric of reality itself. Emma froze, her heart racing. The figure didn't move, but she could feel its presence, as if it were aware of her. The vortex in the center of the room pulsed with energy, its colors shifting in a way that seemed unnatural. Emma wanted to turn and run, but something in her gut told her she needed to understand this. She had come too far. She took a tentative step forward, but the moment she moved, the figure's head turned toward her, its empty eyes seeming to pierce through the darkness. A voice echoed in her mind, cold and distant. "You should not have come here," it said. Emma's stomach twisted with fear. "Who are you?" she demanded, though her voice trembled. The figure did not answer, but the vortex grew stronger, swirling faster. A sense of dread filled the room, and Emma could feel the weight of the loop pressing in around her once again. The figure raised one hand, and the vortex surged violently. Emma gasped as a wave of energy blasted toward her, pushing her back against the wall. Her head spun, and for a moment she thought she would lose consciousness. But as the darkness closed in, a thought struck her. This was the anchor. The figure was controlling the loop. If she could stop it, she could break free. She struggled to her feet, her vision blurry, but the words from the book echoed in her mind. Break the loop. She ran toward the vortex, her hands outstretched, desperate to stop the flow of time that had entrapped her. As her fingers brushed against the swirling energy, a blinding flash of light filled the room. She gasped as her body was engulfed by the force of the vortex. In that moment, everything went black. The light was blinding, a sharp, stinging brightness that enveloped Emma's body. She tried to shield her eyes, but the light was overwhelming. It felt as though her very soul was being torn apart and reassembled. Time was no longer a linear construct. It was a chaotic swirl of moments past, present, and future colliding together. In the blink of an eye, Emma found herself standing in the same street where this nightmare had started. But it wasn't the same. The buildings were crumbling, the sky was dark with storm clouds, and the world felt wrong. She could hear distant sounds, screams, crashes, the whispers of something not quite human. She spun around, realizing she was no longer in control of her surroundings. The loop had not been broken. It had changed her, reshaping her reality. "This isn't real," she whispered to herself, but the terror in her chest said otherwise. Her breath quickened as the realization set in. She hadn't escaped. She had been thrown into another version of the loop. The streets were now empty, except for the faint glow of streetlights that flickered sporadically. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the echoes of her footsteps. Emma turned, hoping to find some sign of normality, but instead, she saw the hooded figure from before, standing motionless at the far end of the street. Its presence was like a dark cloud, looming over her every move. She stepped backward, her heart racing. "What is this?" she muttered. "Where am I?" The figure didn't respond, its hollow eyes fixed on her, as though it were waiting for something. Slowly, Emma started to walk toward it, driven by a need to confront whatever this was. She had to know the truth, no matter the cost. As Emma approached, the air seemed to grow colder, the silence heavier. The hooded figure raised a hand, and Emma froze. The figure's voice echoed through the stillness, not in words, but in her mind. "You cannot escape this. This is your fate." Emma's breath caught in her throat. The voice sounded familiar, but she couldn't place it. She clenched her fists, fighting the urge to back away. "Why?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "Why me? Why this loop?" The figure didn't respond immediately, but then it lowered its hand and spoke again, this time louder, its voice chillingly calm. "You are a part of something greater. Your mind is a key to the cycle, and you are the one who will either end it or let it continue." Emma felt a coldness seep into her bones. The weight of the words pressed down on her, and she realized that the loop wasn't just about time, it was about power, about control over fate itself. Emma staggered back, her mind racing. "I'm not a pawn," she yelled, more to herself than to the figure. "I won't let you control me." The figure's gaze remained unwavering, its dark presence like a weight pressing down on her chest. The coldness in the air intensified, and Emma felt herself being drawn in, as if the very ground beneath her was pulling her toward the figure. The world around her began to distort, reality flickering like a broken film reel. "No," she screamed, fighting against the pull. But it was too strong. The moment she made contact with the figure's outstretched hand, the world around her shattered into fragments. She was falling again, the space between timelines collapsing as her body was thrust through dimensions, each one darker and more twisted than the last. The fall seemed endless, as though the fabric of time itself had torn apart. Emma felt herself tumbling through shifting realities, each one a reflection of her fears, her regrets, and her desires. She was lost in the void, unable to grasp onto anything. Then, everything stopped. She found herself standing in a place she recognized, but it was different, familiar yet alien. She was back in the same street, but it was as if it had been wiped clean, a new version of the world entirely. The buildings stood tall and untouched, the air clear, and the sky above her was bright and warm. It should have been comforting, but it wasn't. There was something wrong with the calm. Something felt off. Then, she saw the figure again, standing at the end of the street, only this time, it wasn't alone. A group of hooded figures surrounded it. Emma took a deep breath, knowing that this was her final chance to break the cycle for good. Emma stood frozen at the far end of the street, her heart pounding in her chest as the group of hooded figures slowly advanced toward her. Each step they took seemed to distort the air, bending reality itself. The familiar buildings around her flickered in and out of focus, as though they were mere illusions. The world she had known was slipping away, replaced by this strange, nightmarish version of her reality. Emma's mind raced. Why had she been brought here? What was this place? She was so close, closer than ever, to breaking free. Yet, the figures were closing in, and with every step they took, the weight of the decision grew heavier. Was this the end of the loop, or was it the beginning of something far worse? She took a step back, her mind torn between the path of escape and the fear of the unknown. "What do you want from me?" she shouted, her voice trembling but defiant. "What is the cost?" The lead figure, still silent, extended a hand toward Emma. For a moment, the world around her fell completely still. The only sound was the pounding of her heart in her ears. She looked at the outstretched hand, her pulse quickening. A strange pull seemed to come from it, a magnetic force that made her feel both terrified and strangely drawn toward it. Her thoughts flashed back to the book, the symbols, the ritual, the ancient clock. They had said this was her fate. But was it really her fate to follow them? Was this the choice she had been waiting for? Could she control the loop, control time itself? A chill ran down her spine as she remembered the warning from the book. Break the loop, or it will consume you. She didn't know what would happen if she accepted, but the fear of staying in the loop was greater than anything else. With shaking hands, she took a step forward. As Emma's hand touched the figures, the world seemed to tear apart. A bright light flooded her vision, blinding her. She felt as if she were being pulled in 1,000 directions at once. Her body jerked, as though she were being stretched and compressed through the very fabric of time itself. She could feel the loop closing in on her, wrapping around her in tight coils. But then, just as quickly as it had started, everything stopped. Emma stood alone in an empty void. Time no longer existed here. There was no past, no future. Only a vast, infinite space that seemed to stretch on forever. Her body trembled with exhaustion, but her mind was sharp. She realized in that instant that the choice was hers to make. She could return to the loop, continue the cycle that had trapped her for so long. Or she could break it once and for all and erase the cycle's existence from the universe. The weight of the decision settled heavily in her chest. Emma's mind raced as she faced the magnitude of her decision. The void around her seemed to pulse with the energy of untold possibilities. She could feel the pull of the loop, its magnetic force trying to drag her back. But she also felt the power of the choice before her, the strength of her will against the pull of fate. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She thought of everything she had endured, the repetition, the confusion, the helplessness. No one should live like this. She opened her eyes and stepped forward, letting the pull of the cycle wash over her. She wasn't going to give in. She would break free. With newfound resolve, Emma reached out into the emptiness, focusing all her energy on unraveling the cycle. She felt the threads of time snap, one by one. The loop shuddered, the walls of her reality shaking as if they were about to collapse. This was it. There was no turning back now. The moment Emma's hand touched the threads of time, the world around her collapsed. Everything shattered, her memories, the loop, her reality. It all crumbled away like sand slipping through her fingers. For a moment, there was nothing but darkness. But then, the darkness began to fade. Emma blinked as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the emptiness. She felt the weight of time lifting from her shoulders, and she gasped as the world came back into focus. She was back on the street she had once known, but everything had changed. The sky was clear, the air fresh, and the building stood tall and whole, untouched by the chaos. The world was finally free. The loop was gone. Emma took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the freedom she had fought for. For the first time in what felt like forever, she was at peace. The cycle was over. But the question lingered. What would come next? And was this truly the end, or just another beginning? Emma stood in the middle of the bustling street, her eyes wide as she took in the vibrant world around her. The air was fresh, the buildings intact, and life flowed around her with ease. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was no distortion, no loop to trap her. She felt free. But as she walked down the street, a strange sense of disconnection began to grow inside her. The world seemed perfect, almost too perfect. People smiled, children laughed, and the cars passed by without incident. It was all so serene. She paused for a moment, uncertainty creeping into her mind. Was this really the world she had fought for, or was it a new illusion? "It feels wrong," she whispered to herself. Something's still off. She had been given the freedom to live, but what did it mean if the reality she returned to was one she didn't recognize? As she continued walking, Emma's unease only grew. It wasn't just the perfect scene that felt wrong. It was the strange sensation that she was being watched. She glanced around, but no one seemed to notice her. Everyone was too absorbed in their own lives. Yet the feeling persisted, like invisible eyes were following her every move. She passed a mirror in a store window and caught her reflection. For a brief moment, she didn't recognize herself. Her face was the same, but there was a hollow look in her eyes, a depth of experience that no one else seemed to have. "Am I really free?" she whispered. The question echoed in her mind, the weight of it sinking deeper with each step. Emma quickened her pace, trying to outrun the doubt gnawing at her. Was it possible that she hadn't escaped after all? That something else was pulling her back into a cycle, even if she couldn't see it? Emma found herself at the same street corner, the one where it had all begun. The intersection looked identical, the same people walking by, the same cars passing. But the déjà vu hit her like a tidal wave. This was the point where everything had started to collapse. She turned around, expecting to see the same coffee shop she'd visited countless times, but instead, it was an old, decrepit building she didn't recognize. The windows were boarded up, and a chill ran through her as she took a hesitant step toward it. The feeling of being trapped crept back into her chest. Had she really broken the loop? Was this some kind of twisted test? "No," she said aloud, shaking her head. "This isn't right. It can't be." But as she stepped closer to the building, she felt an irresistible pull, as if the past was calling her back. The door creaked open, just as it had the first time she stepped into the unknown. With a deep breath, Emma pushed the door open. The air inside was thick, musty, and stale, as if the building hadn't been touched in years. Dust swirled in the dim light, and the silence was oppressive. She hesitated but then stepped forward. The building was empty, save for a few scattered remnants of forgotten lives, old furniture, dusty bookshelves, and broken glass. Yet, at the far end of the room, a familiar figure stood, its back to her. The figure wore a hood, just like the ones she had encountered before. It turned slowly, and Emma's heart skipped a beat when she saw its face. It was her own. Her reflection, distorted and hollow, stared back at her with cold eyes. "You haven't truly escaped," the figure said in a voice that sounded like her own, but twisted. "You are still trapped, and so am I." Emma's body went numb as the weight of the words sank in. "You are still trapped? How could that be?" She had fought so hard, battled through the cycle, and even broken the loop. Had it all been for nothing? The figure stepped forward, its hand reaching out. "You can't outrun yourself," it whispered. "The loop is in you. It always will be." Emma backed away, her mind racing. Was the cycle truly a part of her? Could she ever truly be free of it? The figure's face shifted, its features warping into something dark and twisted, a reflection of her deepest fears. Emma collapsed to her knees. She had been running from herself the entire time. This wasn't just about breaking the loop, it was about confronting the truth of who she was. She closed her eyes, taking a deep, steadying breath. "I won't let you win," she said softly, standing up with renewed resolve. The figure's eyes flickered with recognition, but this time, Emma wasn't afraid. Emma stood before the distorted version of herself, the weight of her words hanging in the air. "I won't let you win," she whispered, more to herself than to the figure. The room, now eerily still, seemed to hold its breath as the two versions of Emma faced each other. The figure's eyes, which had once been cold and empty, flickered with something else now, a flicker of recognition. Emma could feel the energy in the air, the tension between them building. She had fought so hard to escape the loop, to break free from the endless cycle of repetition. But now, standing here face to face with the part of her that had been trapped in the loop, Emma realized something. This wasn't just a battle for freedom, it was a battle for her very soul. She had to face the darkness within her, the part that had allowed the cycle to continue for so long. The figure tilted its head, a cruel smile spreading across its face. "You cannot escape me," it said, its voice sounding like a distorted version of Emma's own. "I am you. I am the part of you that's always been trapped, always been afraid." Emma's heart hammered in her chest. The words struck deep. Afraid. She had always feared the unknown, always feared what would happen if she let go. But what had that fear gotten her? A never-ending loop? A prison of her own making. "I'm not afraid anymore," Emma said, her voice stronger than before. The figure's expression faltered, just for a moment. Emma stepped forward, the room shifting with every step she took. She could feel the pull of the cycle trying to draw her back in, but this time, she resisted. She couldn't let fear define her anymore. She had come too far. The room began to shake as Emma's will clashed against the force of the cycle. The walls around her warped and twisted, reality itself beginning to crumble. The distorted figure of herself raised its hands, summoning a dark energy that swirled around the room like a storm. "You cannot break what was never meant to be broken," it hissed. "The loop is eternal. It always returns." Emma felt the weight of the words, but she didn't back down. She had to break it. With all the strength she had left, she reached inside herself, pulling out the raw power she had gained from her journey. The energy coursed through her, filling her with clarity and purpose. She was the key to ending this. "I am not part of this cycle," Emma said firmly. "I am the one who ends it." In a blinding flash of light, the room erupted in a burst of energy. The walls shattered, and the distorted figures screamed as the darkness began to dissipate. Emma stood in the center, her arms raised as the energy she had unleashed collided with the very foundation of the loop. Time itself seemed to break, crumbling into fragments. The figure's form began to unravel, the darkness that had clung to it dissolving into the air. Emma's heart pounded as she felt the cycle finally come to an end. For the first time, she felt truly free. She collapsed to her knees, exhausted, but triumphant. The world around her was silent. Still. She had done it. She had broken the loop. But as the last remnants of the darkness faded, Emma knew that this was not the end of her journey. The loop was gone, but her future was wide open. She could live. She could breathe. Emma stood in the now empty space, her breath slow and steady. The world had changed. No longer was she trapped in a repeating cycle, but free to choose her own path. She gazed around, taking in the empty space where the cycle had once confined her. A new world stretched out before her, untarnished and full of possibility. She could feel the weight of her past, the loops, the struggles, but she knew they had shaped her into who she was now. She was no longer afraid. She stepped forward, the floor beneath her solid and unyielding. "I am free," she whispered to herself, her voice steady and sure. And with that, Emma took her first step into a world she could finally call her own. The future was hers to shape. No more loops, no more fear. Just endless potential. And in that moment, she understood. She had been her own prisoner, and now, she was her own liberator.